We're going to focus on the lessons for sales leaders and aspiring leaders as well, emphasizing on growth, resilience, and creating a lasting impact. The former regional vice president for UK and I for OpenText, former sales leader for companies like Software AG, Boxit, and IBM. Did you used to be crap at sales?
Well, to be on the podcast, I have to say yes, and I think I was.
And how crap are we talking on a scale of 1 to 10?
I think 4, but even as a salesperson, I didn't know anything else other than just ring more people, speak to more people, work harder. I've done well in IBM, for example. I had a couple of promotions in 5 or 6 years. I had a massive multi-million target, selling sort of 15, 20 million type deals.
Let's talk about fractional leadership. How do you ensure that you're going to have a long-term impact as a fractional sales leader?
You've got to balance having a short-term impact and getting results quickly. It's a mix of being very, very hands-on. Particularly the role at Boxit was where I did that.
How quickly for you, when you've hired someone, can you work out if you've made a mistake or not?
Month. In those cases, they're not adding to the team, those people, and they're not driving the team forward. If you feel it after a month that it's wrong, put some tests in place, put some measures in place that you can monitor it more closely. I think there's been a bit of a shift away from training and like a one-size-fits-all. I don't think it's moving the needle. They'll forget 90% of it within a fortnight.
What do you think is the biggest misconception companies, sales leaders have around coaching?
That it's a bit woolly and theoretical. They're doing it already. 90% of sales leaders think that they coach their teams regularly, and only 38% of sellers get regular coaching.
What's the biggest mistake you see first-time sales leaders making, and how can they avoid it?
So I think
Hello and welcome to another episode of the I Used to Be Crap at Sales podcast. I'm your host, Mark Ackers, the co-founder and head of sales here at My Sales Coach. We call the podcast that because it's true, and all of our guests say the same. Today, I'm joined by the founder of Leaps and a fractional sales leader for many organizations, the former regional vice president for UK and I for OpenText, former sales leader for companies like Software AG, Boxit, and IBM, and a My Sales Coach coach, whose mission is to help improve sales performance for both individuals and teams. My guest today is Richard Bounds. This episode is going to dive into Richard's extensive experience in building, scaling, and leading sales teams. We're going to look at his insights into fractional leadership and his philosophy on coaching as key to sustainable sales success. We're going to focus on the lessons for sales leaders and aspiring leaders as well, emphasizing on growth, resilience, and creating a lasting impact. Richard, there is your introduction. Great to have you in the city of Newcastle and on the podcast. Welcome.
Thank you very much. Thanks for hospitality, and great to be in Newcastle, and amazing introduction as well. Yeah, thank you.
Guests always say that. That's a good intro, but it's just like, this is just who you
just
are,
read
Richard.
Off LinkedIn. That's always slightly beefed up anyway, isn't it? But it's fantastic.
You tell me, Richard. I understand you've been to Newcastle a number of times.
I have. I came here as a kid to watch Newcastle play football, and then my stepdaughter went to uni in Newcastle, so I must have been here like 5 or 6 times. You're right beside the street of all the bars, aren't you? So I know that street better than this street.
Yeah. Well, it's great to have you here. In terms of the podcast today, we always start with an opening question, right? Richard, let's just get straight into it. Did you used to be crap at sales?
Well, to be on the podcast, I have to say yes, and I think I was, yes.
And how crap are we talking? On a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being, my God, I was so bad. What would you score yourself?
I think 4.
Okay, it's not a terrible number.
When I realised I was crap, I'd been selling for about 4 or 5 years, and I'd actually done quite well. It was only when I moved up to a sales management position and the market changed, certain other things changed, and I realised it was tough. It wasn't just about working harder. I'd always been sort of brave, had good attitude, would ring anybody, and wasn't an idiot, I don't think. And people seemed to quite like me, but I kind of realised there was a lot more to it than that when things just became a bit more complicated.
And that's the moment, I suppose. Let's start there. It sounds like you had a moment when you realised you were crap. You've been in sales for, you say, 4 years at that point. What happened for you to realise I'm crap at sales?
I joined an Apple dealership. So it was when they were called Apple Centres, and we were primarily selling to corporates. I was much younger than anybody else they'd taken on before, so they took a bit of a leap of faith with me. Joined at 21. They asked me at 24 to be the sales manager. I was the youngest in the team of about 11. And then the market just changed completely overnight. Anybody and everybody could sell Macs, and the margin went from high 20s to sort of low teens. The commissions scheme had to change dramatically. People were quite disgruntled. Deals were harder to come by. It was very, very competitive. And I think all I just told people to do was just work harder, make more calls, speak to more people. And there's just a bit more to it than that. And that's when I realized that I had more to learn.
That feels like that's you saying you were crap at sales management, not sales.
I suppose so, yes. But even as a salesperson, I didn't know anything else other than just ring more people, speak to more people, work harder. That's obviously been a big ethic of mine anyway throughout my career, is that, the harder the work, the luckier you get, and things of that sort.
I think that is true for a lot of people that have been successful in sales up until a point, are those that work the hardest. Like you say, like people say sales isn't a numbers game, but equally, if you make 1,000 dials compared to someone that makes 10, numbers will come into your favour. Being promoted at the age of 24, being the youngest person on the team as well, that's really interesting. Why do you think they picked you to be the manager at that age?
It was an interesting one because I think we were a company, we had maybe 12 salespeople, 50 employees, something of that type. 2 or 3 of the better sales guys went to Corporate Computers, a big corporate reseller that had got their rights to sell Macs. And I was the top performer. So I was getting the best results as an individual. There was a couple of other people who wanted the role. It was a lady who owned the business, and she just came to me and asked if I would like to do it. And I just said yes.
It's interesting. So it feels like it was more than just the fact you're a good salesperson. She clearly identified some traits in you that she felt would make for a good manager, because they're obviously very different, and top performers get promoted, but it doesn't make them a good manager. But as I say, it seems like she found some good characteristics in you as well that she felt would make you a leader.
Yeah, and I suppose to your point, was I a crap salesperson or a crap sales manager? I do think that I was a pretty average sales manager at that point, because I didn't really understand the sales process, didn't necessarily know how people tick. For example, someone wasn't performing, and this was quite a while ago, I was told to just put their stuff in a box and meet them in the car park. And that's basically what I did. The change in margins with the commission schemes and so on. So we had to change from, I'd say, almost a commission-only scheme to part basic, part commission, which I negotiated with her, but it was reducing people's salaries dramatically. I think she suggested I just stand on a chair and communicate it to the sales team in that way, and that's what I did. And I look back now and think that's a terrible way of dealing with that situation.
Do you think part of that was, though, I mean, at the age of 24, how are you to know any better?
I just took her and the MD's guidance while they shut the door, to be fair, and left me to it.
They just literally left you to it?
Yes. Yeah.
Oh, that feels really unfair.
It probably was when you think about it. They wanted to know the feedback and so on, but I think they wanted me to deal with it. They did pick up some of the pieces. So some people had been working there for 10 years plus in sales, and then they warranted them, if that's the right phrase, a conversation on why it happened. And they gave those people rightfully the time of day, because they'd given a lot of time and effort to growing the business, and they deserved to have that opportunity to speak to the owners, not just a 24 or 25-year-old sales manager.
Mm. How old was the team? Like you said, you were the youngest. What was the age range of that team?
Probably 28 to about 54. So quite diverse. The guy that was 54, really good guy. And there was another guy who was in his 40s. I kind of worked with them as sort of mini deputies, if you like. And I really took their guidance on things from a very early stage. I asked them to team manage 4 or 5 guys each. One of them set up a new division as well when we were trying to expand in terms of PCs, servers, and other things as well. So I felt that I tried to help them grow and develop, and I really listened to what they had to say as well. So
yeah, it feels like you really started a baptism of fire in your management career, 24, 25, learning certainly the hard way. I always like to ask for a howler. I want you to kind of maybe separate from that, because we've heard that story. When you look back over your sales career, it could be as an individual contributor, could be as a manager somewhere else, but everyone's got a funny story where they just think, I really mucked that up. Have you got a story that springs to mind?
Probably at the time wasn't that funny, but actually at OpenText, so it was maybe 7 or 8 years ago, so I can say it now.
Right.
But the National Grid Network Operating Center was almost evacuated because we were doing these little videos in a box, and you open them up and it's an animated video explaining what we did. Our marketing team sort of sent them everywhere, blitzed, that's probably the wrong term actually, sent them everywhere to lots of different companies, and National Grid thought it was a suspicious device. After realizing it wasn't, they contacted us at quite a senior level, made quite a big fuss about it. And I guess funny a bit was the lady in marketing was on a short-term contract, so she went pretty soon after that. But her leaving gift was a video in a box that one of the team did for her in the kind of the style of The Office. And they asked if I'd do a bit of a David Brent thing. I didn't do it very well, but it was a really funny little video, and we put that in a box and gave it to her, and it opened up and just played. It was quite cool.
Did she take it well?
She really took it quite well. Yeah, she liked it. I think it was 5 minute long, and the guy that did it does drone videos, and it was actually quite funny.
Can you do a good David Brent impression?
No.
Okay. I get the feeling not what to ask. In terms of your career beginnings, then, you've been in sales for over 35 years. How did you first get into sales? Was it by choice or chance?
Well, I guess when I realised about 10, I wasn't good enough to be a professional footballer. I went to careers advisor at 13, and I think this is quite unusual for other people I've heard on this and other podcasts. I said I wanted to sell secondhand cars. Right. And she said that I should set my goals a little bit higher, and that perhaps I should be a PE teacher. So not exclusively because of that, but I was planning to become a PE teacher. I had a place at Nottingham Poly and so on, and I was going to go and do that. And then during sixth form, I got a Saturday job selling TVs and videos in Debenhams. I really enjoyed it. You'd queue at the till at the end of the day, see who'd sold the most. And, I was a spotty 16-year-old coming in just for the Saturday, and I was selling as much as their top performer, Steve Gregory. I remember him really well to this day. I just really enjoyed that environment. The manager, he got me on a commission scheme, which is unusual for a Saturday boy. It's only £1 for every extended guarantee that I sold, but it added up, considering I was probably on a very, very small hourly rate. And I realised then that I just wanted to be in sales.
So out of interest, why do you feel like Stephen Gregory has remained in your mind? Was there a moment where he was really helpful to you?
He was a really good guy. I'd actually met him because he used to work at Dixon's, and I used to go into Dixon's on my lunch break, which is going to make me sound quite sad, just to look at what they had for sale, maybe listen a bit to how they sold stuff. And I ended up speaking to him. He was known to be a top dog at Dixon's, and the bosses at Debenhams were keen to get him to come across. He came across, and I still sold more than him nearly every Saturday. And as I say, as a spotty kid, someone was looking at a TV or video, I'd say I'd go and see if we got it in stock, and I'd come round with a big grin in the box and just take them to the till. And that was my closing technique.
What I've picked up already, just in 2 stories you shared with me, is how you've embraced someone that's kind of had what you want, achieved what you want. So we got the 2 older salespeople in your previous job. You sort of harness those. Other managers might have looked at those older people and thought they're going to be trouble, they're going to be difficult to manage, but you actually brought them in. I can learn from you, teach me. Stephen Gregory works next door, you're going next door. What is he doing? What is he saying? Can we actually bring him into the organisation as well? Which is great. Is that something you've always done, like trying to learn from older people?
It is a bit, to be fair. Even at the Apple dealership, there was a guy who was the most successful sales guy. And my very first day, they sat me in the corner of a copy of Mac User. I noticed this guy, Mark, was the top sales guy. I asked if I could go out with him. I had a really good day. I remember we went to see Elf in Knightsbridge and General Electric in Hammersmith. He took me to Harrods for as much coffee as you could drink for like £5 because we were a bit of a wait. And then he took me to his local for a few beers. And in fairness, he just told me and taught me quite a lot about the importance of relationships, because he'd sold contracts for this customer and just made sure they got what they wanted. And he really looked after that customer.
And you mentioned your dad was in sales as well.
Yes. I got massive respect for my dad. He sold typewriters door to door and calculators door to door. That was how he started. And then he ended up running quite a successful sales training company, and was, as a good role model as a father, but as a kind of salesperson and someone with great credibility. And, people have only got nice things to say about him as well.
So he had his own sales training business. Did you ever think about working with him in partnership?
No.
Why not?
My dad's style of sales training is probably different to what I would feel more comfortable with anyway. And obviously he finished that quite a few years ago, but he did sort of classic classroom training, 2-week intense courses, 3-5 days intense courses. And he's probably more of a performer, I'd say, than I am. And he's a good speaker.
Right, okay.
Not that I'm hopefully not that bad, but he is a good speaker.
And how aware is he of what you're doing now? Like, do you talk about it a lot? Does he give you any advice?
It's funny, well, if I was playing tennis, say, with my dad, when I was young, if he gave me any advice, as soon as he would walk in the net, I'd go, oh, here we go. And I wouldn't really listen to him. But when I first started in sales, he gave me a couple of real nuggets of advice that helped me massively. And I'd probably less ask for advice now, but I do still go to him as a sounding board, certainly. And he knows I'm doing this. And I expect he'll listen. So I probably need to be even a bit nicer than what I've just said.
What's his name?
John.
John, if you're listening, drop us a message. You say he give you a couple of golden nugget pieces of advice. I can't not ask, what were they? People
will tell you can't do things. That's nonsense. Just crack ahead. There'll be negative noise and just focus on the positives. One I mentioned to him the other day was if someone leaves, be around their desk. And it always makes me smile as a sales leader. If someone's left, I'll get a couple of salespeople in the team, say at OpenText. I'm not going to name their names, but I know which ones will contact me within a few minutes or an hour of somebody leaving, saying, "What's happening with this account? What's happening with that account?" Or "I think I might be able to help you here." And it just makes me smile because that was the same advice my dad gave me years ago.
In terms of then your career, so you've built and led some impressive sales teams, including at one point you had over 30 AEs reporting into you. What's the biggest lessons you've learned about scaling sales teams effectively?
A big lesson is not rushing it, especially in larger companies. You have maybe a limited time window when headcount is available. It might disappear, but I think it's really critical just to get the hire right. The person's got to add to what you've got already in the team and improve it, not make it worse.
And when hiring, particularly in a scale-up mode, what's more critical, hiring for skill or cultural fit?
I'd say cultural fit because, and I would have said that's changed over my career. I think in the past I maybe would have looked more for skill, for track record, for experience or something similar. Whereas now I think I'd be much keener. Some of these things would be things I'd have hired for always, but enthusiasm, drive, inquisitive. I've always looked for people that I'd buy off myself, so people that are authentic and credible as well. So I think some of the experience can be taught and developed if the person's got the right attitude.
How do you assess all of that in an interview? Because the one thing even crappy salespeople are good at doing is selling themselves in an interview. What's your method for trying to weed people out in an interview process?
I can't say that I've got this perfectly, but I think I've got a tradition of doing it quite well, and that's getting people to give real life examples of where they've sold, to go through the process in really fine detail and go through that as if it were a 1 hour deal review and really focus on that in depth. You can see how they think about the selling process. They actually understand why that customer brought, what they've said that's made a difference, and maybe how it started, whether they've built a business case, whether they understood the value of the deal. I think that's really pretty imperative, and also getting other people's perspectives as well.
What % of candidates slip up at that stage in the interview?
40-ish. So I'd say just less than half.
A good chunk of people, though,
yeah,
at that point drop out. So as a very experienced sales leader and a fractional sales leader for lots of companies, you'd have seen lots of sales leaders try and scale sales teams. What's one of the biggest mistakes you see sales leaders make when trying to scale sales teams?
Well, I have seen people, it feels like rushing the process a little bit, particularly with what I was saying around headcount perhaps disappearing, maybe concerns about candidates disappearing. I think the hiring market is a little bit easier now. There's more choice and more people available. So I think there is time to get it right. I can think of a couple of instances recently. I've also taken referrals, which has always for me been a really sound place to hire against. But a couple of those maybe didn't feel quite right. I have hired a couple that didn't feel right. I've tested my theory about maybe were they quite authentic enough? Would I buy from them? Because I wasn't convinced that I actually would. And other people kind of gave some reassurances. I'm not blaming other people because I've still got to make the decision.
How quickly for you, when you've hired someone, can you work out if you've made a mistake or not?
A month,
I reckon.
Yeah.
And how long do you let it play out for?
Probably too long, but three to six, which is too long, I think, actually, isn't it? When you know after a month, and I think the mistake I perhaps made, and I can see it now, is in those cases, they're not adding to the team, those people, and they're not driving the team forward. And I think, teams can be, obviously the old adage isn't there, as strong as its weakest link. And if you've got weak links in the team, I feel they can bring the team down. And I know that in that particular example, we've replaced with new high energy individuals, and it's brought a new dynamism to those teams, and results have improved as well.
It's a really interesting mindset. I've always believed that the traits or behaviors or mindset of your weakest salesperson is basically the benchmark for everybody. Here's the thing that I'm struggling with, that I think a lot of people will be, is you might realize a month in, but how much of that is got to give them a bit more time. Ramp time, is anywhere between 6, 12, maybe 18 months for some organizations, and in some companies be even longer. But how do you cope with that? Because people can't let people go after a month, can they?
No.
3 to 6, even that's awkward, because they're your person, you've hired them. Like, what would your advice be to someone that perhaps is listening to this podcast now, they've got someone relatively new in seat, and in their gut they just think they're wrong? Like, what advice would you give to them?
It's going to sound a bit harsh, this, but I think I'd act on it earlier, which I know doesn't necessarily always give the person the opportunity. I think if you feel it after a month that it's wrong, put some tests in place, put some measures in place that you can monitor it more closely, and maybe not be emotive about it and be completely logical. Yes, we all make mistakes. I'd review it after that 1 or 2 extra months. You have to give people a chance to prove yourself right.
Should you tell that person after a month or 2 months that you think you might have made a mistake and see how they react?
Yeah. I'm not saying I have always done that, but I actually, moving forward and over the last couple of years, I would do, yeah.
How do those conversations normally play out? Because surely then straight away, they're going to start looking for other jobs or start acting differently.
If they are determined to prove you wrong, and maybe they have got the right attitude and they do have that capability and desire, then they'll prove you wrong, and that's a good thing, isn't it?
So I think the key then is what you're saying is, look, if you feel like you've hired the wrong person, don't drag it on. Have a conversation with them, put some stuff in place. Like what kind of things can they put into place to try and measure and track this?
Well, I wouldn't necessarily put them on a PIP, but I think using kind of the structure of some sort of plan that's got some measurable objectives, whether it be number of meetings, dialogues with customers, do some simple internal tasks, do a presentation back to me or others of what the business proposition is and why people should buy it, and make a positive impression on others in the business. Because normally if I'm thinking that, other people will be commenting that or seeing the same themselves.
Really valuable advice there, Richard. I think a lot of people are going to be listening to that and have that feeling about someone in their team and maybe not acting upon it. You've obviously spent a lot of time in startups, scale-ups, major organizations as well, like IBM, Software AG, etc. How have you seen leadership in sales differ between those environments?
Well, I think in the bigger the company, probably the more time managing up than the smaller companies. And the smaller companies, I feel you can make, as a sales leader, a bigger impact. You can make more change, and you can get a bit more just done in the business.
So what do you prefer then?
Well, I've done well in corporate world, but I think I prefer the smaller, more dynamic organizations. Again, where you can have a big impact, you can see the progress, you're working with founders, you're making changes in the business, and really driving things forward.
Looking to unlock your team's full potential? At My Sales Coach, we pair individuals and teams with expert coaches for personalised one-to-one and group coaching sessions. Our platform makes booking seamless, it tracks progress, and delivers real results. Studies show expert coaching increases win rates by 30% and revenue by 7%. Whether you're an individual or a team leader, we provide coaching that sticks and delivers. Visit mysalescoach.com, use the link in the bio, and start achieving your goals today. When you say you've done quite well, what are you referring to when you say I've done quite well in corporate? What's your metric there?
Well, I guess that I've progressed my career well. I've done well in IBM, for example. I had a couple of promotions in 5 or 6 years, selling, had a massive multi-million target, selling sort of 15, 20 million type deals. So I focused on IBM because I was less inclined to be a manager there, to focusing more on bigger deals and bigger customer engagements. And then Boxit, Software AG, and OpenText. In each of those companies, I've been promoted in my time there. So I've obviously got to be doing some things right, and I've done well against targets. So I suppose they're the obvious measure in sales, aren't they?
Absolutely. Well, yeah. Some would say it's the only one that
counts. Isn't it? Yeah.
Got to ask, what's the biggest deal you've closed personally?
The biggest one personally, where I was an AE at IBM, was 16 million.
Right.
Pounds.
Annual up front?
No, that was, to be fair. Probably would have been about a 4-year deal, something
so 16
like that.
million over 4 years.
Yeah.
What percent commission were you on?
Do you know, I honestly don't know. I can't remember. But that would have been a big year. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. How would you have celebrated with a big payday like that?
Do you know what? Probably quite boringly. Maybe a curry and a few beers. That's quite disappointing, isn't it? I haven't done anything. I think maybe IBM, there was a culture of sometimes doing a few beers with friends and stuff after work, but it wasn't ever riotous or anything.
You've also had a lot of VC experience, sat on the board of VC-backed companies as well. How's that exposure to being part of a board for VC-backed companies sort of changed your perception on what companies should be doing when it comes to growing and scaling their teams?
Particularly the role at Boxit was where I did that. And we had a VC, and a lady that was on the board there was excellent. She really helped with clarity of vision for the business. I think the chairman and chief exec were really creative, had lots of ideas, but we were probably chasing too many things. And the VC was very supportive of me trying to steer the company in a direction of having several go-to-market plays with business cases against them and aligning the business behind that. And she backed that fully, as, to be fair, did the other board members. And they gave me remit to write a blueprint for the business, and we moved the business forward on that perspective. The owners gave me, well, I'm not a marketing person or have particular marketing expertise, but they gave me the rights to rebrand. We did the website completely. I was sat at home in the evenings rewriting the website, but a really good opportunity to get involved in lots of different things, not just the kind of the deals and sales part.
Let's talk about fractional leadership. Fractional leadership becoming really popular. Lots of networking events, when I meet people, they tell me they're fractional CRO, fractional CFO, etc. What's the value you've seen in the fractional model, especially for startups and scale-ups?
I think of it, if you're buying anything, and I think of this as customers who are buying complex technical solutions, or if it's an individual, you want least risk, best value for money, and you want some degree of flexibility, and you want the best, really good service. And I genuinely think, well, through me anyway, but that's what fractional leadership can give you. And other fractional leaders that I'm seeing, they can give scale-ups and startups that expertise. They can bring that experience. And a lot of those organizations aren't quite ready for full-time CRO, VP of sales. They just need help with direction, with strategy, go-to-market messaging, unblocking the pipeline, and things of that ilk that maybe relatively new AEs can't deliver for them. And they need those AEs to be coached and developed and pointed in the right direction. And that's where I think a fractional can help.
When you're parachuted in a fractional sales leadership role, what is the most common problem that you're seeing straight away on day one?
The priorities, like a little bit of a lack of priorities, focus. What's the uniques? And I would probably hone people down on what's the one thing, what's the one thing that's going to make the biggest impact, and make sure we get that right. And that's, I think, a key.
From a buying point of view, are you a good person for salespeople to prospect? And what I mean by that is, if I was an SDR or an AE and I was prospecting, would I want to be selling to someone in a fractional role? And I see it as one of two things. One is they're not really going to make any decisions. They're only there part-time. They're really focusing on steadying the ship. They don't want to buy. The other side of the coin is No, they're there to get shit done. They will buy and they will implement, particularly if your solution can propel that business. Should SDRs and AEs be targeting fractional leaders, or should they not?
I think if they're in situ within companies, then to your point exactly, you're there to get stuff done, make an impact, and make a difference. And certainly, one of the things I wanted to do at the beginning was have some relationships with whether it's technology or service companies that I know that I can trust and I can bring in and make improvements within companies that I'm working with. So I think, yes, there's merit in that, definitely.
SDRs and AEs, they reach out and prospect you?
Not all to me personally, because I don't have that much time each day. But yes, but to fractional leaders, yeah, I think so.
But you don't get hit up too much, though?
I do a bit, actually. Not half the time. They still think I'm work for OpenText, so they're trying to sell maybe something to do with that. But I do get quite a few.
See, I mean, but that's annoying, right? Because really, that's just sloppy. You can see on LinkedIn you've moved on from that role.
Yeah.
But anyone that is doing a little bit of research on you can see that you're in a fractional role for certain companies, and what you're saying is you don't get loads of outreach compared to what you might have done as a sales leader at OpenText. Sorry.
Yeah, I might have said it's probably half what I get, and half of what I get still think I work for OpenText, and those I'm actually quite responsive to people because we've all been there, and I think if you're a company that's got salespeople and you're making calls to prospective customers, I think you should give people that 30 seconds that they ask for. And if it's interesting, take it further from there. That's, to be fair, how my relationship with my sales coach started.
Can you remember who gave you the cold call?
He told me Noah. Yeah.
I bet he did.
And it was a good cold call, to be fair, well.
He's well coached. It's interesting. Basically, what I'm taking from that is that the fractional role, if people aren't prospecting into that, they should be, but they should take more care to make sure they're prospecting them at the right place, not getting them at their previous company. What's the hardest part, do you feel, for stepping into a fractional leadership role?
I think it's probably like joining a new company or a new role. There is some established dynamics and you've got to quickly get your way around those dynamics, particularly if it's a smaller business and you're working directly with the founders. They've got established ways of working, and some of those you've got to support and get behind, and some of those you'll want to make an impact and change.
And with your time being so limited with organisations, what's the average amount of time you spend with a company every month as a fractional leader?
So I've got like 2 at the moment. One would be like 1 to 1.5 days per month, and the other is pretty much 2 at the moment. And we're doing that till the end of January. I'm not sure it's the best way for me and my business, but the way I like to do it is I'll do it short term, check the fit is right for both of us, and then we can look at something longer term.
And with such a limited amount of time, how do you ensure that you're going to have a long-term impact as a fractional sales leader?
Well, it's a tricky one because you've got to balance having a short-term impact and getting results quickly. So it's a mix of being very, very hands-on with, even supporting. I'm probably doing more selling than I've done for the last 10 or 15 years. So getting hands-on with deals, supporting deals, whether it's the founders or AEs that are conducting them, but also putting in place better processes, practices for the future. And, if, for example, what a common thing might be, the value-based messaging isn't quite right, that becomes that, and questioning around that becomes intrinsic once you've left. So it's just improving those behaviors, similar to some of the coaching principles.
What is the most rewarding success story you've experienced in a fractional leadership role?
I think the work I'm doing with Curvo, and I can say it because they know I'm doing this as well. It's just being involved with them in hands-on deals, tweaking slightly the messaging that they're giving and the approach to proof of concepts and the sales process, seeing them adopt some of those and actually having wins and successes. And we'll do more than maybe a quiet curry and a few beers if we get something when we get the next one.
It sounds like you're doing a lot of coaching for them as well.
Yeah, reasonable bit, yeah.
Let's talk about the role of coaching in sales. And that, as I picked up on it earlier on, although you're saying, well, I've not done that intentionally, it feels like you've always looked for people that have walked in your shoes, had the success that you want, and you've sort of embraced that. And what about yourself? Have you ever had an actual coach and coaching relationship with someone coaching you?
Yes. So actually, can I go back like a tiny bit? So when I was at the Apple dealership, the company ended up getting acquired. I knew at that point I wanted to leave and go and work in an environment where I could learn value-based selling, learn more complex deals. I went to a couple of companies for interviews. I was offered a role at CompuWare. At the time, they had a real coaching culture. It was properly old school coaching culture. And, my boss sent me home for my shoes not being polished once, and I don't know what you'd think. I'm wearing like trainers or whatever today. So he would not be happy, but it was a, very different environment. But, we do a forecast. Deal reviews would last an hour on one single deal, all completely new to me, but I kind of understood the sales process and how that followed. He was very, very focused on coaching, not much empathy, but he was very, very focused on coaching. He was excellent. I've always looked for managers that will coach as well.
Can you give us a few examples where you have been a sales leader for a number of years, but you've had a situation where actually I want a sounding board, I want to go to someone else? Like, can you give us an example of where you've had to do that and how the coach has helped you?
This wasn't the formal coach, but when I was offered the European role at OpenText, I did go to somebody that had been my previous manager and who'd been a really good coach for me. And I wanted to use them as a sounding board as to, is this the right thing for me to do? And similarly with my own coach that I've been using when I was looking to set up Leapsand and work with you guys, he was very good just for giving me that bit of extra confidence that it would be a success.
When you talk about hiring managers, you're always saying you're always looking for managers that are coaches. Tell me, how are you looking for that? What is your way in which you identify if a manager would be a good coach?
Interested beyond the short term. I think in fairness, some of the questions they might ask during the interview, the fact that they talking about coaching is probably something that's come in more in the last 10 years. And like everybody I'm speaking to is talking about coaching at the moment, not really just because I'm doing coaching, but even say OpenText and other big companies, they are trying to introduce coaching culture beyond deal reviews.
Why do you think that's changed over the last 10 years?
I think there's been a bit of a shift away from training and like a one size fits all. If you look at most sales teams, they've got a wide range of skills and experience. And I think a singular training course on one topic isn't going to work for everyone in the room. And I think that coaching gives more focus on the individual and exactly their needs.
Why do so many businesses still pick for that singular, everyone in one room option then?
I think they think it's good for morale. I don't mean to, and I think sometimes it can be a good team building exercise, but I don't think it's moving the needle stuff. I think people will, there's all the data, isn't there? People will go, they'll listen to it, they'll forget, I can't remember the exact percentage, but they'll forget 90% of it within a fortnight, and there'll just be those one or two snippets that they take with them. I think coaching, especially if you lead the person to the answer, is a lot longer lasting, and it's proven to be.
Let's talk about like maybe coaching and where managers you've seen get it right, get it wrong. When you're seeing managers coach and you're experiencing what coaching looks like in the companies that you're working for, what do you think is the biggest misconception companies, sales leaders have around coaching?
That it's a bit woolly and theoretical and that they're doing it already. And I love, there was a piece of data from the research that you guys did. And I guess being sales leader, we all like numbers, don't we? But I remembered it was 90% of sales leaders think that they coach their teams regularly, and only 38% of sellers get regular coaching. And there's obviously a massive mismatch there somewhere, isn't there? And I think that's really the hub of the question.
I mean, yeah, you remember that data really well. Like, just for the record, yeah, I think
that right?
Yeah, I think you're right. 38% of reps claim they rarely get coaching.
Yeah.
Yet 90% of sales leaders claim they coach at least once a month. Let's expand upon your answer. Why do you think there is such a disconnect there?
Well, I think there's a couple of reasons. So one would be sales leaders would often, and perhaps I've done this as well in the past, think that a deal review is coaching. And I think a deal review could be coaching if it's a trend or something that's going to impact other deals, and you're actually even calling out what you're spotting. I think that's probably the number one reason. And the second is, people are just looking at in-quarter situations or maybe total pipeline as a whole. Doing coaching as we do at My Sales Coach, and I'm involved in now, I get more time, so I do it properly. I can analyze meetings. I can sit in on recordings. I can give very constructive feedback, and you have dedicated sessions with no distractions and nothing else. It's just there for coaching. Where even sort of a one-to-one, I think, a lot of people would consider that to be part of their coaching, but it's only coaching if you're coaching during that one-to-one.
Obviously, you'll appreciate the sentiment of sales leaders being busy, right? And if you think of all the things that sales leaders have to do, it can be on any given day, but recruiting, onboarding, training, coaching, one-to-ones, deal reviews, forecasting, internal meetings. What do you believe is the main thing a sales leader can do to help their people achieve their goals?
To be involved, to get involved in deals, to be very hands-on, supportive, to demonstrate you're in it together, I think is a really powerful attribute. I think if things within the business need to change, that actually you're steering the business to make changes. Sales has got to have a voice with product, with marketing, so that you're demonstrating leadership, not just managing the forecast and managing upwards. You're having an impact and making change whilst you're doing that. Coaching people for the long term, not just for what do you need to say to get this deal done.
When you talk about all the things they can do, it feels like a big part of what you're saying there was like, get involved, be on the sales calls, be listening to what's going on. And you obviously can listen to call recordings or listen live, etc. How do you avoid the challenge that comes with being on live calls where you just take over? Because that's not going to help the rep long term.
That can be a tricky one. I mean, I would always set the roles quite clearly at the beginning. And I think the role of a leader is to be secondary on those calls. I've had some leaders that they're saying, well, I'm the leader, I'm going to lead the call. I don't personally agree. I'm not on that camp. I think you're the kind of the co-pilot. You're there to demonstrate leadership, support, maybe answer some specific questions that might be a little bit more strategic. But I think that a real key for me would be just having clarity of roles at the beginning. You'll do the intros, you'll do the agenda setting, clarify the objectives. I'll probably pick up this, and this question, but let them take the lead. And I wouldn't really expect, if it's an AE sales director, I'd expect the AE to be doing 75, 80% and the sales director 20, 25%. I'm sure there might be somebody listening who say, I didn't do that, but I think I've done that throughout my career.
Here's a situation that I see play out, and this happens to me as well, but you say all that, you do the intros, you ask these questions, but when the prospect realizes who's at power goes to power, and I can see in calls I listen to where that dynamic's there, the sales leader there's, the IC's there, or calls that I've been on where I'm the manager, you can see that the prospect just wants to talk to you because you're the senior leader on the call. And I've got a few ways in which I can push it back to the IC, but how do you deal with that?
Yeah, definitely seen that as well. And I would maybe be taking one or two questions on and then take, so that actually I am working with that customer, delivering a little bit what they want so that I'm actually answering and being engaged fully. But I would tend to deflect it back to the individual contributor. So I'm not saying I do this every time, but my normal routine, I think, for that situation would be answer the one or two questions, make some points, but also then deflect it back to the individual contributor.
Hey, sales leaders, do you want a cost-effective way to develop your team's skills and help them smash their quotas? My Sales Coach offers team memberships for just £20 per month per individual plus VAT. This will give your reps access to small group tactical coaching sessions, daily power hours, and exclusive events, all led by world-class sales coaches. With over 25 group sessions to choose from monthly, there's something for every role. We have sessions for SDRs all the way up to CROs. Empower your team to perform to their best. Visit mysalescoach.com to get started. The link is in the description. A lot of people that listen to the podcast, Richard, are sales leaders, but we also get a lot of aspiring sales leaders. And as someone's got 30 years experience in this realm of sales and sales leadership. What's the biggest mistake you see first-time sales leaders making, and how can they avoid it?
Yeah, thank you for pointing that out again. So I think for first-time sales leaders, I think one of the biggest challenges is trying to demonstrate all the answers straight away. And I think you've got to listen to your team. You've got to give them chance to shine and collaborate and work on things together. And I think that's probably the number one. And the number two might be following the noise. So it might be, you might have a very noisy AE who wants lots of help. And it's easy to then just respond to everything he or she is asking, whereas that might not be the best use of your time. I think you've got to treat it like a territory, maybe build a bit of a plan and apportion your time in a more structured way.
When we talk about like your length of time as a sales leader, I want to know, welcome, how it's changed. And let me, I suppose, give you a more focused question. But you've experienced at 24 meeting someone in the car park with a box of stuff saying, thanks, but it's over, to being a fractional sales leader now, working with sales leaders. What skills have you seen come into the game that modern sales leaders need now that they didn't used to need, and how can they learn those skills?
I mean, it's way more inclusive now. I actually do feel sales is considered, it's not there yet, but more as a profession. It's very much more long-term customer thinking, and really exceeding and delivering on expectations is very much more critical now than it perhaps was at the beginning of my career. I think data and AI is having an impact. There's you say about call recordings, using AI intelligence and things is very, very powerful, and data reporting is key as well. And I think it may be, I think of sales sometimes a bit of kind of somewhere between an art and a science, and there's obviously a debate, is it an art, is it a science? I think it's moving slightly more to the science end of that spectrum over the time that I've been in my career.
When you say it's moving more towards a science, what art do you think is being lost?
I don't think it's necessarily being lost, because I think with even some of the technology I've been looking at more recently shows things like key moments in a call. So, and it's sharing that with other people, and how do those key moments determined, whereas you didn't used to have that. It might just be, go on a meeting with a good sales guy or girl, and you can just see and hear how they operated. So I think some of that science is used to enable others with to get that art right. And I think that sometimes there's too much emphasis on, we got a playbook for that, we got a playbook for this. People need to understand how to determine value, how to dig into problems and pains, and that piece I don't think is getting lost. But the amount of people that I'm coaching, that I'm needing to go into the importance of that, and they're not necessarily as aware of it as I would have expected, that's probably a bit of a surprise.
I think one of the things that I'm seeing, and you're right about conversation intelligence, right? It's a space I know really well. Yeah. I feel like the art is still there, but the art is taking the science and making it look like an art. And what I mean by that is, you now have like a repeatable talk track that is scientifically proven.
Yeah.
The best questions to ask, when to ask them, how to ask them, because you've got hundreds, if not thousands, of call recordings that show you from your team, ask this question, this works, have this many stakeholders at this power, deals should last this long, this value. And I think you have all this science, but what you've got to be is kind of like how you describe your dad. You've got to be that performer that can make that feel like this is a natural conversation where two people are engaging, they're looking to buy, all you're doing is there to help them.
Yeah.
But actually everything you do is extremely calculated from a science point of view, but the art is making it feel really natural. And I think it's that flipping it where is it an art or a science? It's both, but the art is wrapping the science up into a performance.
I like that answer. Can I not have that answer?
In terms of your legacy, I'm not trying to make it sound like you're about to go anywhere, but obviously you've now set up Leaps, and you're working as a coach at My Sales Coach, and your mission is to help salespeople. The reason I asked you when I called out when you said I've done quite well in previous roles is, how do you measure that today versus then? How do you measure success now is the question really, versus when you were at IBM doing, £4 million a year, 4-year deals? Do you measure it the same way, or is it different?
It is definitely different. So I think when I first started and when I was selling, I'm very competitive, like probably much more so than I've been told loads of times, I'm much more competitive than it perhaps comes across. I think I sort of people feel I'm quite calm, quite quietly spoken, but I'm massively competitive with myself. I'm constantly striving to kind of prove myself in everything that I would do. So I think in the beginning, it would just be around winning competition, and they were my key drivers. I think I loving being able to help people. I mean, obviously I'm not a charity or anything, so I'm still doing it for commercial drivers, but I love having the opportunity to impact businesses, help individuals, and see them improve. It's really powerful.
It does feel like a totally different measure of success.
Yeah.
I get you're doing that for commercial gain, but so is everybody, right?
Exactly, yeah.
As I say, lots of people listen to this, either sales leader or aspiring sales leaders. Let's say you're going to start coaching someone that wants to become a great sales leader. What would you say are the non-negotiables that they need to have as principles to become a great sales leader? Integrity,
I think, is massively important. You've got to be fair. You've got to be equitable with everybody. I think open and honest as well is critical, just in terms of everyday dealings, but also your feedback. If you're, I've perhaps been guilty of being too polite in the past, and too English. But I think if I've definitely feel like I've really come on leaps and bounds in terms of being very open and direct with feedback, and passion. You got to love what you're doing and the environment you're in.
Richard, we're finished with one final question, but let's imagine you're about to start coaching someone that's been in sales for 4 years, right?
Okay. Yeah.
And they say, I think I'm crap at sales. I don't know what to do. What would your advice be?
Well, it takes me back a long time that you've reminded me of that several times. But if that was me in that situation, and what I'd do differently is I'd want to understand the root cause, why I think that's the case. I would speak directly and honestly with my own manager. But I think more importantly, I'd call me, and get some help and do something about it.
I'm here whenever they want to give me a call.
Likewise.
Richard, thanks for coming all the way up to Newcastle. It's great to have you in the studio, great to have you in the office, and spend some time with you. Thank you.
It's been fantastic. Thank you for hospitality and the conversation.
Welcome.